Hi, boys and girls. The story that we're going to read is called Stone Soda Bread, and it's written by Julie Douglas. Make sure you touch the words as you're reading aloud with me. Okay, here we go. You see, it all started when a stranger came strolling up the road from Bollyknuckles. He seemed a friendly sort, but they weren't used to strange faces in the village. He called himself Rafferty. He was on his way to the big town, so he said, and was looking for a bite to eat. The menfolk mumbled, "We've nothing to share." The women agreed, "Not a scrap to spare." "No matter," Rafferty chuckled. "Lucky for me, I know the recipe for stone soda bread. Made with only a stone, so it is." Mrs. O'Mara was the first to speak. "Soda bread from a stone?" she clucked. "Why, what nonsense!" She wrung her apron in her pudgy hands and rolled her eyes at the stranger. "No, it's true," Rafferty exclaimed. "I learned the recipe from my own granny when I was but a lad." He pulled a stone the size of hen's egg from his pocket. "Ah, this will do quite nicely," he cooed, rubbing the stone on his shirt sleeve. The villagers gathered in closer. Could it be true? Bread from a stone? "Do you say a magic spell now?" little Liam asked. "A spell, is it?" "Oh, goodness, no, child," said the stranger. "No, all I'll need is this stone. And the recipe, of course." He tapped his head and winked at the boy. "Is it tasty then?" asked Mrs. O'Mara, her tummy rumbling. "Ah, yes, indeed," said Rafferty dreamily. "It's best warm out of the oven, all crusty and chewy at the same time." He licked his lips. "I'd better get started then." "Can we help?" Liam offered. "After all, it is not every day you see a loaf of bread made from only a stone." "Yes, yes," the villagers agreed, for though they weren't willing to share their dinners, they weren't opposed to a bit of work. The stranger scratched his head. "I can't say that I've ever had help with the recipe," he said, shaking his head. The villagers looked at him sadly. Still, it couldn't hurt, could it? A cheer went up, and then they listened carefully to what he told them. "First, we will need a bowl and a spoon," he began. Mrs. Finnegan clapped her hands. "I have just the thing," she cried. "Yes, grand," Rafferty said when she returned. He dropped the stone into the bowl and began to stir. He whistled a little jig as he worked. "That's it," said Liam. "That's all you do?" Rafferty handed Liam the bowl. "It takes a bit of stirring, lad," he said. "Would you be so kind?" Liam eagerly took the spoon and began to stir with all his might. "That's all there is to it," Rafferty announced. The villagers stared in disbelief. "Of course, this is just the basic recipe," he said. "To make a really fine stone soda bread, it's nice to add a little flour and baking soda." "I have flour," shouted an old woman. She hobbled off and returned with a sack of flour and a spoonful of baking soda. Before he scooped the flour into the bowl, Rafferty took out the stone. "It's best to put the stone in last. If you are going to be adding other ingredients, that is," he said. "Other ingredients?" said Liam. "Well, it's not completely necessary," Rafferty said, "but some sugar and an egg would be nice." Before you could say "Killybegs," the shopkeeper had returned with a cup of sugar and a fine brown egg. "The very thing," said Rafferty. Liam stirred the flour, soda, sugar, and egg. "Should we add the stone now?" he asked. "Well, I suppose we could," Rafferty said, "if we are not going to add anything else." "What else?" the villagers cried. "Oh, perhaps a little oil and splash of buttermilk," he said, "but only if you think we need them." The villagers answered by running to fetch the oil and buttermilk. Mr. Powers even brought a sack of raisins to add to the mix. Liam stirred and stirred as they added the new ingredients. Rafferty poked his finger into the batter and took a taste. He sighed. "I dare say that this is almost the best stone soda bread I've ever made." "Almost the best?" cried Father Walsh. "Tell us, what would make it better?" "Well, if I had some caraway seeds to add," he began. "I'm your man," cried Father, and he raced to the rectory to collect the seeds. Liam stirred the mixture until it was thick and sticky. Rafferty poured the batter into a loaf pan. Then, with the flick of his wrist, he cut a cross in the top of the loaf. The villagers crowded into Mrs. O'Mara's kitchen as she popped the pan into the oven. Soon a delicious smell wrapped around the hungry villagers. "But Mr. Rafferty," Liam whispered, "the stone! We forgot to add the stone." Rafferty smiled at Liam. "The bread is actually better when you keep the stone in your pocket," he told the boy. Liam held the stone tightly in his hand and blinked at Rafferty. "Besides," Rafferty said, "I'm passing the recipe on to you, lad. You'll need a fine stone like that for the next batch. When the bread was done, Rafferty placed it on the table. He smiled at the villagers. Of course, you know what would really make this stone soda bread perfect, he asked. A pot of tea and some fresh butter, perhaps, suggested Mrs. O'Mara. She put a kettle on to boil as Rafferty sliced the bread. And stew, cried Mrs. Finnegan as she lugged a steaming kettle through the door of the cottage. She ladled up bowls of it for everyone. Soon the stranger and the villagers were feasting. Laughter and singing filled Mrs. O'Mara's cottage. "'Tis the best stone soda bread I've ever tasted," exclaimed Rafferty as he winked at Liam. "'Tis," agreed the villagers, "and to think it was made with nothing but a stone." Okay, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that story. Make sure that you read it on Wednesday and Thursday. Okay, have a great day.